Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is not messing around. He just gave an incredibly powerful speech where he blasted Donald Trump, and he talked about how Canada and Europe will lead the way forward as America first actually means America alone. You also had Pete Buttigieg, former President Barack Obama, and numerous other pro-democracy leaders in America, in Canada, having Prime Minister Carney's back. Let me show you what went down. First, Prime Minister Carney posted the following: Canada and Europe are united in our values of pluralism, the rule of law, and democracy. On Europe Day, we're building on that foundation to forge new strategic partnerships, deepen our trade, and stand steadfast with Ukraine. In a more uncertain world, Canada and Europe are creating greater certainty, security, and prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic. In other words, bye-bye, U.S. Canada now views itself as European. Prime Minister Carney also said, for a better and more just future, we must name plainly what is broken, say how we will replace it, and do the hard work of building. That's what we focused on at the Global Progress Action Summit in Toronto, and Prime Minister Carney keynoted that with a vengeance when it came to calling out Donald Trump. First, you had former President Obama meet with Prime Minister Carney. The symbolism of these two powerful, intelligent people representing democracy side by side sent a clear message to the world. At the same time, people were rejoicing in Budapest as Peter Magyar became the Prime Minister of Hungary, and as Hungary cast away their authoritarian, dictatorial Orban regime, whereas you also had Putin with that disgusting parade that he had, low energy, low T Putin's parade. We saw democracies on the rise yesterday. And then Prime Minister Carney gave an incredible speech where he said, those who seek policies or politics to destroy, demolish, or dismantle, they're not going to change. We can't pretend that this rupture will just go away if we are more timid versions of them, if we are Trump light. What we need to do is we need to unite and stand up powerfully against these authoritarians. Watch what Prime Minister Carney said. Let's play this clip.
I'll tell you something, I've probably told you everything I've said, but those whose politics is to destroy, to demolish, dismantle, they're not going to change their instincts. This is, in many respects, this is their moment, right? We can't match them by being timid imitations of them. We can't answer them by pining for an old order that's not going to return. And the loss of control that people feel that feeds our age of anxiety, it can only be answered by positive action, by building that which comes next. Through the crack in the bell, as Leonard Cohen said, through the rupture that the light gets in. In this more uncertain world, building for all, actual building, concrete, steel, and code is the new progressive politics. And our message to Canadians right from the start has been reflecting back what we've heard. It's a more dangerous world. We have to take care of ourselves. And as Canadians, we will always take care of each other. Building a country that's not just strong, but's good. Not just prosperous, but fair. Not just for some most of the time, but for all Canadians all of the time.
Prime Minister Carney then talked about how the U.S. has changed dramatically, and if that's what they want to do, that's their prerogative. But here in Canada, here with our alliances in Canada, we are going to tread a new path, a path that is not dependent on the United States. Far from it. This is an elbows up path. Let's watch what Carney said. Let's play it.
We need to build new trade relationships in order to move from reliance to resilience. And it's truth that Canada has long benefited, and we are very grateful. We have long benefited, we did say thank you, long benefited from our proximity to the world's largest and the world's most dynamic economy. But as the US changes dramatically its policies, and that's the right of the United States, as it changes those policies, many of our former strengths have become our vulnerabilities. We still, to be clear, we still have the best trade deal with the United States. Over 85% of our goods move tariff-free across the border. But with American tariffs, so-called 232 or strategic tariffs on autos, steel, aluminum, forest products, I could go on, but in these so-called strategic areas, those are creating deep challenges for our workers and firms in those industries, industries that until now had been highly, highly integrated with the United States to the benefit of America as well as Canada. And our response begins by reimagining aspects of North American integration. And to be absolutely clear, Canada, like Mexico, Canada remains open to deeper integration, including options for Fortress North America in selected sectors. And to be clear, those offers are on the table. But if that route is not ultimately possible, we will invest heavily in new markets and products. We'll reward those who build, buy, and produce in Canada, and we will build new partnerships abroad. We're already applying the main lessons of the past 18 months, that we must build our strategic autonomy.
And then, like the statesman, like the intelligent, multi-dimensional chess player that he is, while Donald Trump ain't even playing checkers, Donald Trump's like eating his marbles. The hell is he doing? But Prime Minister Carney talks about the variable geometry dense with partnerships that Canada can take advantage of. And we see that. Canada participating in a leadership role in the European Political Community meeting in Yerevan, Armenia. Acting as a leader, Prime Minister Carney was, or at the ASEAN conference, where Prime Minister Carney acted as a leader, or in Davos, where Prime Minister Carney brought the house down. Here's what Prime Minister Carney said. Let's play it.
We're making this progress because we have the values to which much of the world aspires, including commitments to sustainability, the rule of law, the belief that openness brings strength and mutual benefit. And we're making this progress in part because we've recognized, in some cases before others, the degree to which in the new world sovereignty requires more than a country just being able to feed, fuel, and defend itself, as important as that is. It requires access to those critical minerals, to space-based communications, to sovereign cloud, AI, payment systems, clean energy, and vaccines. And all of that demands partnership. And there's no one-stop shop for that partnership. We need a variable geometry, a dense web of partnerships across those core strategic capabilities and issues, drawing on common values and interests, because it's those common values and interests that will assure alignment and respect to those agreements.
More from Prime Minister Carney here, talking about how it's not just in Canada, but across many, many countries across the world. The same conversations are taking place across kitchen tables and factory floors and chat rooms, which is how can people survive and make it through day to day where so much of the wealth, where so much of the resources is being hoarded by a class that seems to be with no rules, immunity. How do we get power back to the people? Here, play this clip.
Across all our countries, I think this is safe to say, across all our countries, the same conversation is taking place at kitchen tables and factory floors and chat rooms, people feeling a loss of control. It's a conversation that's been going on for a few years. Control or loss of control over their cost of living, loss of control over who comes across their borders, loss of control, as we just heard, over what enters their social media feed, control or loss thereof of a technology that may displace, destroy their jobs before it improves their lives, control in a world that's more divided and dangerous by the day. And that loss of agency, control, is the common thread through all our politics. It doesn't respect ideology, it doesn't respect the old left-right map. And it has fed a politics of grievance, one that thrives on scarcity, feeds on division, and promises strength through demolition. And it won't be addressed by the old ways. And just as Marshall McLuhan, that's my necessary Canadian reference, Marshall McLuhan, described 60 years ago, our age of anxiety is caused by trying to do today's job with yesterday's tools and yesterday's concepts. And I thought that was one of President Obama's main points last evening. A fascinating conversation. Point that we need new institutions as much as reimagining the old ones. And that was part of my argument at Davos, that the international rules-based order that we helped build together no longer works as it once claimed, that we cannot restore that which no longer holds, that nostalgia is not a strategy. We have to take the sign down and build anew.
So you've got some major breaking news, Justin. Let me interrupt for just a minute because this is something people need to be paying attention to right now, especially with hurricane season just weeks away. Trump's FEMA Review Council has just released new recommendations that critics say would dramatically weaken the federal government's disaster response system and shift more of the financial burden onto states and local communities. The timing here is raising major concerns. According to the recommendations, states would be expected to take on more responsibility for disaster recovery costs, even as many states are already struggling with budget shortfalls and increasingly severe climate disasters. The proposal also encourages private insurance companies to take over more flood insurance policies from the National Flood Insurance Program, something that critics are warning could make coverage harder to get and significantly more expensive for families already dealing with rising insurance costs. At the same time, Trump's budget proposals have included massive cuts to FEMA preparedness funding, including more than $1 billion in reductions for state and local emergency programs. There are also reports that FEMA staffing cuts could eliminate over 11,000 positions. And here's another major point. Data shows that disaster aid approvals under Trump have been far more likely for Republican-led states than Democratic-led states. Critics are saying disaster relief is being politicized at the exact moment that communities need fast, reliable help as extreme weather events continue to intensify across the country. And remember, this comes as tariffs on construction materials are already expected to increase rebuilding costs by nearly $11,000 per home, according to builders' estimates. All right, well, now I need to hear from you. What do you think about all this? What are your thoughts on the Trump administration's actions, on their approach to the climate, on these climate segments that we do here at MeidasTouch? Let me know right now in the comments. I'm going to be reading them all. Okay, Ben, back to you.
And of course, Prime Minister Carney recognizes, as we should recognize in the United States, Canada was built by Indigenous peoples. And I love that Prime Minister Carney doesn't shy away from that. That's not, ooh, woke this, woke that. It's the truth. It's the truth. And we should respect our Indigenous communities here in the United States. And it's incredible to see a leader like Prime Minister Carney doing the same. Let's play it.
Canada was built by Indigenous peoples, voyageurs who mapped this continent and built trading networks from coast to coast to coast before, with due respect, the Americans had even left St. Louis. Whenever we have something over the Americans, we're going to use it. I'm sorry.
Now I'll remind you, too, of Prime Minister Carney's speech following that incredible trip to Yerevan, Armenia, where it looked like Prime Minister Carney was leading the European political community meeting. And here's what Prime Minister Carney said on the international order being rebuilt out of Europe. It's a belief in democracy that binds together Canada, the EU, UK, Australia. Play this clip.
Which is a belief in democracy, the rule of law, that we're all equal before that law. And imperfectly, the international system had variants of that. But Madame Arbour's part of her very distinguished career was to make sure that those who transgressed in the most egregious ways those rules, norms, standards were prosecuted and brought to justice. That system, as I've observed in the past, and I'm not alone in making these observations, has been greatly weakened and needs to be rebuilt, and rebuilt perhaps in a different way, but rebuilt based on the same principles. And Canada, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, other countries share very firm convictions with those principles, and we will work together to rebuild. And obviously there's a critical mass in Europe of countries, 27 members of the European Union, but then a broader grouping that you saw in that meeting in Armenia, over 50 countries that have some form of association with Europe and either fully support or are moving towards those principles. So that's what I meant by those comments, and I stand by them.
And then Prime Minister Carney at that Yerevan, Armenia event said, "We don't think that we're destined to submit to a more transactional, insular, brutal world. We should not submit and tap out. We should assert ourselves now more than ever." Here, play this clip.
Now, we have to actively take on the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. We know nostalgia is not a strategy, but we don't think that we're destined to submit to a more transactional, insular, and brutal world. And gatherings such as these point to a better way forward.
And then Prime Minister Carney talked about Canadian-EU relations, how we see ourselves complementary of Europe. Here, play this clip.
We view ourselves as highly complementary to your economic and security goals. That's demonstrated through the work we're doing with the presidencies on the new EU-Canada Strategic Partnership of the Future, building deeper relationships from digital to defense, supply chains to security. We're honored to be the first non-European country as part of the EU SAFE initiative. We would observe that in the last year, we have struck $18 billion worth of critical minerals deals across 20 of the world's leading critical minerals. The way to look at this is we are warehousing these to look for government-to-government deals with our close partners and under the rubric of the G7 first and foremost, but then more broadly. We're working with European partners across the technology stack, from hardware, cloud infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and space. And as we'll discuss later, we are an energy superpower, third largest oil producer, fourth largest natural gas, largest hydro renewable base. We're committed to addressing climate change while providing reliable, affordable energy to our citizens and partners. In closing, we're here because of your invitation. Again, thank you for that. But we're here because of the moral and security imperatives of our cooperation in the Caucasus, in the Baltics, in Ukraine, across Europe, and also because of the immense potential for our partnerships to build a better, more prosperous, sustainable, and just world for our citizens.
And then he talks about the rupture that Donald Trump has caused to the world order. Let's play it.
The world is undergoing a rupture across several dimensions: in technology, in energy, in commerce, and geopolitics. Integration is being used as a weapon by some, and the rules are not constraining the hegemons.
Could we just contrast that right here to what was going on in Russia at the same time that Carney was giving that speech? In Russia, they had their Victory Day parade where they brought out the widows and mothers of these soldiers killed in Putin's invasion of Ukraine. You know, it's about 35,000, 40,000 Russian soldiers are dying every month as Putin sends them to the meat grinder. Here, let's watch this.
Сержант Большаков принимал участие в выполнении сложнейших специальных и боевых задач в зоне проведения специальной военной операции.
Елена Владимировна Константинова, мама гвардии старшего сержанта.
Now, as I mentioned at the outset of this video, Pete Buttigieg joined the panel at this event, and Pete Buttigieg gave his perspective on Donald Trump's unlawful tariffs. Let's play it.
The tariffs, at least the IEEPA tariffs, are not trade policy. They are about power. They are a means for, precisely because they were, not really, but supposedly something a president could unilaterally do, a means to flex a kind of power such that any country, company, or industry needing relief would have to personally appeal to one man in order to survive. Obviously, the fact that that was illegal has complicated that strategy, but that strategy has already done a great deal of damage.
And then Pete Buttigieg talked about how Trump's America First has really meant America alone. Let's play it.
In practice, America First has really meant America alone. Every country puts itself first. So no one should expect anything different from any national government, but what has actually been behind this slogan has, of course, been a process of alienating friends and poking allies in the eye and dismantling some of the partnerships and friendships that, in fact, helped to keep America in first place, which I think is the real aspiration of the American people. And for our country to be leading, whether it's leading economically, militarily, or socially, it is important that there be an atmosphere in which people want to follow and find that following is in their interests. And you cannot bully people into that.
Now, I know all of my Canadian viewers know what I'm about to show you, but I want to give everybody the international perspective and also zoom out a bit. So, in Canada, they have their Maple MAGA. By the way, before Carney, Maple MAGA was expected to win the elections, and Pierre Poilievre, Mr. Maple MAGA, woke this, woke that. I mean, he's right out of the Trump J.D. Vance talking points. He was expected to win and become the prime minister. But as Donald Trump attacked Canada, as Canada went elbows up, as Carney ascended, Pierre Poilievre fell, and he lost his riding, meaning Poilievre lost his congressional district seat, humiliated. But then he basically stole or took over someone else's riding. They could trade ridings in Canada. So he took somebody else's after he lost. Really pathetic. And then he just shows up in the parliament and still does his arrogant woke this, woke that, transgender this, transgender that. The same old MAGA playbook, the Orban Trump shtick. But in the provinces, in Alberta, they have Danielle Smith. Now, Danielle Smith, she goes to Mar-a-Lago. She's Maple MAGA. She's in the pockets of big oil, big corporations. I mean, she's really a sick human being, really is. And she's Maple MAGA, and she's right out of the Trump, Orban, Putin talking points. So you'll see at her event, which she tried to counter program the events of, Carney's speech, she uses the same Trump lines. Woke, 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 woke. Here, play this clip.
Because in Alberta, we are also putting an end to the era of wokeism. We passed, yep.
And then she attacks Gavin Newsom and AOC. Let's play it.
Saudi Arabia and UAE, of course, do not have a carbon price, but they're both investing in carbon capture utilization and storage, direct air capture. They're both bringing on alternative renewables onto their grid. And so we're seeing that some of the largest energy producers in the world have determined that it's important to keep on investing in this area. And so even though the U.S. has taken a different turn in the last 18 months, heaven forbid Gavin Newsom become a future president, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But you just know that if there's a change in White House, there's going to be a whipsaw effect of going in a different direction as well.
There you have it, folks. I just want to let you know that that's lingering in the background there. And really, Danielle Smith has uplifted, and I believe she's inextricably intertwined with a separatist movement. And you have to focus on what's going on behind the scenes, because just like Putin and Donbass and Putin trying to, Putin's taking over, annexing territories and proclaiming them like Russian territories, supporting separatist groups, right? That Trump and J.D. Vance and Trump's disgusting regime behind the scenes are working with separatist movements in Alberta to try to peel off Alberta and then make it a 51st state. That's actively going on right now. I just want y'all to know what's happening behind the scenes. There you have it. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks, everybody.
New Midas merch. Head to store.MeidasTouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.